It started with a cockroach. I was laying in bed at night when I felt it crawl through my hair and skitter down my neck. Screaming, I leapt out of bed and ran into the living room, swiping my back and hair, trying desperately to get it off me. After a few moments, I calmed slightly, realizing it was likely gone. I sat for a little while before grabbing a cup from the kitchen to try to trap it. It was 2 a.m., and I just sat in a chair, staring at my bed, waiting. Eventually, I heard a sound and saw it come out from under the bed, but only for a moment before going back, and then silence. I watched for about 2 hours, but it never came back out, and I never heard another sound. Finally exhausted, I went into the living room and unrolled my yoga mat. I went to sleep for an hour before I couldn't handle that anymore, so went back, waited for another half hour before crawling back into bed, convinced the roach had left. For a few days, I was paranoid. I have a bit of a cockroach phobia, and every little thing to brush my skin, from a dog hair to the AC, was obviously a cockroach. It didn't help when I found one in my hair during a shower. My nerves were starting to get a bit crazy, but finally, after some time, I started to get back to normal. Maybe about a month after the cockroach visited me in my sleep, I woke up one morning, unable to find my cell phone. I generally sleep with it on my bed, and I don't roll around much, and I'd never knocked it off my bed before. I spent entirely too long combing through my blankets and pillows before deciding it must be on the floor somewhere. So my bed is pushed into a corner, and it clearly wasn't on the open side. The items under my bed prevented me from seeing the side by the wall, so I figured it must have fallen between the wall and the bed. I pushed my bed out just enough to get my hand down there and reach down. It was such a small crack, and I felt that there was no way it had bounced very far, but I couldn't see or feel it. Finally, frustrated, I pulled my bed out further and leaned down to look under. And there it was, perfectly in the middle of the space under my bed, angled parallel with the bed, screen up. It was the most suspiciously placed phone I'd ever seen. And that's when I knew I had an anglerfish. That evening, I was hanging out with Pochi over Discord, and I told them that I had an anglerfish. I described the situation in detail and explained how clearly it was meant to be discovered at night and lure me under the bed, but it was so obviously a trap so the anglerfish could eat me. We laughed about it. I obviously didn't actually believe this. Right? Until I woke up in the middle of the night, reached for my phone, and couldn't find it. There was just enough light in my living room that when I looked over the open side of my bed, I could see the phone sticking out from underneath. This time it was half under and at an angle. The anglerfish had clearly heard my discussion, so it changed its tactic. I turned on the light, got down on my hands and knees so I could clearly see what I was doing, and picked up my phone. I didn't sleep well that night. The strangest thing to me was that I had never knocked my phone off my bed before, and now I did it twice in a row? There's no way, right? But then it happened 3 nights in a row. This time it was my glasses. I woke up at night, and I really don't know what woke me up, but I instantly reached my phone, found it, but my glasses weren't there. I turned on the flashlight, and the first thing I did was look over the side of my bed, and there they were, sticking out in the same place my phone had been the night before. I left them until morning, and I switched to text-only communication about the anglerfish inside my home. Clearly it was listening. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, things would go missing and turn up under my bed. Once I even found Bean sleeping under the bed, and I just pretended not to see him. One night, I realized, of all things, my vibrator, which had been hooked on the headboard, was missing. There was no doubt where it was, and I just decided the anglerfish could keep it. But after a few days, I decided enough was enough, and I pulled out my bed to feel around, and I couldn't find it. I put my whole head under, but I couldn't see it. I sat up and angled my bed and looked over the headboard to finally see it, but when I reached under to get it, I quickly realized that it was impossible to get it with my head under to see what I was doing. I could only feel around blindly until my hand found it. And it did, but I felt pretty unnerved by the whole thing. A couple of nights went by without incident, but it wasn't long before I found myself laying in bed, unable to sleep, when something bumped the underside of my bed. I stayed frozen. Didn't react. Beans was asleep next to me, and Bear was asleep on the other side of the room. There was nothing else that could bump my bed. It happened again. I was terrified, but I still didn't react. I did my best to keep my breathing steady. I didn't want it to know I'd heard it, but it was silent the rest of the night. But the next night, it happened again. Both dogs were in bed with me. There was nothing under the bed, except the anglerfish, of course. It bumped more violently this time, but once again I didn't react. I had realized it couldn't attack me as long as I stayed on the bed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be trying to lure me at all. After a second bump, it was silent. I eventually fell asleep. After that, things stopped disappearing. I feel like the anglerfish finally realized that I wasn't going to be caught so easily, and I feel those bumps were just a last-ditch effort before giving up and moving on. Anytime anything went missing, I would joke that it was the anglerfish, but the item would turn up, and it was never under my bed. One day I was having a window AC unit installed, and I just needed to move my bed so the technician could access the window. I took this as an opportunity to sweep, and that's when I found it. There was a dead cockroach under my bed. For a moment, I just stared at it. I hadn't seen any other cockroaches in a long time, so was this the same one that had crawled on me a few months ago? But it didn't take long for me to make the connection. I believe this roach was dead from the beginning. The anglerfish's first contact. It dragged the roach through my hair, down my neck, then let me see it go under the bed, and once it was under, it was silent, which doesn't make a lot of sense for a skittery creature like that. But I never went after it, and the anglerfish had to think of a new tactic. There have been no new incidents for a few months, and I'm certain the anglerfish has left, except that for a few nights I've been having painful dreams about something being pushed up my asshole. When I wake up, the pain quickly vanishes. I've joked about it, but there's a part of me that imagines it's a light tendril, stealing its way into my shorts and up my bum. Maybe it's trying to hook me and drag me under the bed. I think there are better ways than that, but I never said anglerfish were smart. If I stop streaming at some point and don't return, I think it's best to assume that the anglerfish has successfully infiltrated my butthole and pulled me under the bed and into its jaws, but until then, I will continue to be your Poppy Eyelight, the Sphincter King.